Hello. Let me see if I can get this fixed real quick. Very bright right now. It's all right. Sorry for the delay, everyone. Had a family thing come up. Should be good now. But thanks for your patience. Hopefully everyone's having a good Wednesday so far. Hopefully you all are excited for starting Photoshop. Hold on, don't know if my, let's see here. Hello, everybody. Hello. I'm trying to figure out if I can fix something on here. I had a thumbnail for you guys and I don't think it worked. Dang it. Wonder if I can do it while it's here. Here we go. Can I change the thumbnail? Yep, I can. Nice. Hello. Hello, everybody. Seems like a bunch of people are jumping in. Awesome, awesome. Okay. So, kind of on the docket for this week is, like I said, our intro to Photoshop. I do have some things I want to talk about on our assignment page, as well as just in general. So let's go to our assignment page here. I just realized my thumbnail's spelled wrong. Let me fix this. That's funny. This font is hard to see sometimes. Let's do this file, save as. Do this. Now I'll have to refix this again real quick. Oh, learning the intricacies of YouTube here. Let's see. Studio. Live. That should fix it now. Okay, let's jump into our assignment. Seems like some of you have already said they got a little anxious and already started working on it. Somebody already finished the assignment too. Jeez. Okay. Not that. Let's not look at that. Okay. Assignments. Okay. Perfect. Design number 1. Okay. Everybody's week so far going okay? I think I asked, but I just want to... I don't know if I saw anybody's responses. Excited about Photoshop, hopefully. Let me move my face out of the way here. So, for our assignment this week, we are going to be designing, not even designing, just drawing some simple game characters, okay? And I have Pokemon as examples, right? Because Pokemon tend to have pretty simple designs, easy to follow, easy to read designs. You can definitely find Pokemon with more complex designs, but lots of them have very simple lines and things that should be easy enough to follow. Excuse me. So, as far as the characters, I don't really care. They can be Pokemon, but simple game characters, right? So, like, excuse me, hold on, I'm gonna sneeze. All right. So, like, you could do Mario, you could do Sonic, you could do whatever, just something simple, okay? But the thing with those is you're gonna draw 6 of them, okay? And they're gonna be freehand. So what I don't want you to do is grab like an image off of Google, throw it into Photoshop and trace it, right? That's not what I want you to do, okay? What I do want you to do is freehand it. Now, what that does mean, though, is you could take your first one that you freehand and then use that one to help you create these next 5, right? So, also to help keep you consistent, I mean, I don't mind if you freehand all 6 of them. If you change the pose or something like this, too, that's fine. Or, excuse me, you can do 4 of them like this and then a couple different ones, or you could do all 6 of them, you know, in the same pose. However you want to do that, okay? Your hands are in pain. Oh no, I'm sorry. So the thing with them, with each 6 individual drawings, right, is that you're going to try to change up the style in between each one, okay? You're going to try to pick a style that evokes a different feel or mood or just a different kind of emotion per each one, right? Like, you could grab and gather, you know, that these are 4 individual designs, very different from one another, right? Same thing here. A couple of these here are a little bit similar, but still pretty different, right? This one is very kind of painterly and sketched, where this one is very simple and kind of a one line, right? This one is very watercolors. This one is more, you know, like heavy marker or maybe even an oil brush, kind of. So, yeah. And then, like I said, all the characters. So once you do that, I want you to get all 6 of them on a page, right? And then once you get all 6 of them on a page, make sure they're arranged nicely. Create a nice composition. Don't just drop 6 of them randomly on the page and then just kick out a PDF or a PNG or whatever, okay? Make sure you organize them nicely on the sheet. Make sure it looks nice, right? To give you some examples of previous stuff done. I think I have a couple of them. Let me see. Previous ones that I was working on. I did this little Duskull the last time. We did a couple different ones. So we were working on these. We didn't quite finish, but we got through some of these different ones here for Duskull. I definitely did. Let's see. I have more though. Oh, we did a Spheal one time too, where I drew these. Then we've got a couple other ones too. I thought I had a whole compilation of them. Let me see. Different ones that I've done. See if I can find them for you. Really should organize this file a little bit better. Oh, here's this one. We did this one time. We did a little Dreepy. We've done a couple different ones. Did a Rowlet at one point, I think, too. Where's that one? Oh, we did a Chocobo. This one time. So we've done some things. Okay. So we'll work on one today. What I'm going to do is we'll get through what I want to talk about with some, we'll talk about line for a few minutes, and then I'll do a little bit of an intro to Photoshop, and then I'll just start working on the assignment as if I were going to do it myself. Okay. And I'll walk you through different brushes and things that I'm using, maybe some different techniques to use layers and things to work properly. Okay. So we'll do a little bit of an intro to Photoshop after we get through a little bit of a discussion here. So I'm going to grab my drawing tablet so I can kind of use like a digital whiteboard, and let's have a conversation. Okay. Let me get this out here. We'll just do this real quick. Very cool. I love Cyndaquil. Let's see here. I am going to plug this in the back of my computer real quick. How long did it take me to draw Spheal? Not too long. Hello, how's it going? To those of you that have just jumped in and said hello. I don't know exactly how long it took me to draw that Spheal. Probably 20 minutes. Not too crazy long. Okay, let's see here. I do not know a good place to put this right now. We'll just go there for right now. And when we need to discuss something over there, we'll move it. Okay. So I have a page of notes. This is the only, most of my other lectures and things I have slideshows for. This one I don't, just because it's pretty straightforward and goes pretty quick. So, and it's pretty simple, and I like to kind of do a live demo while I'm talking about it. So let's talk about line a little bit, okay? And things that kind of pertain to line. So try not to have your eyes glaze over because we're talking about something so kind of straightforward and a little bit boring, but hopefully this is informative for you. But let's talk about line a little bit, okay? I'm gonna bump this up just so it's a little bit easier to see, maybe. Okay, so when we're talking about line, right? Lines are the foundation of drawing, right? Line is perhaps the most familiar element of design. Everything that we know is built up out of lines, right? When we look at a drawing, or you have a manga book, right? Or you've got a comic book or a illustration or something, or even character designs and things like that. Line is a very familiar element in which those things are being designed with, right? Okay, when we talk about lines usually have length and width, but tend to have more length than width, right? And a line can be abstractly thought of as a zero width object. Okay, so there is not a line here between the separation of my canvas and my open space in Photoshop here, but there is a line here, right? If we were to look at this, you would say this is a line, right? It's a zero width object. There's no width to the line there, okay? But because of the change of hue, right? There's a perceived line happening here, okay? So, as we talk more about this, we'll talk in depth a little bit in that about the the relation between hues or shapes, okay? So when we add width to a line, we can call that line weight, okay? So if I have just a standard brush here, let me grab a brush. I also need to adjust my Wacom to just be on one screen. Okay, much better. Don't worry about too much about what I'm clicking and pressing right now. This is just to give you a demonstration, okay? So if I have a line, right, and I draw a line and I do something like this, okay, and then I add line weight to that, right? I add width to it, right? This is considered line weight, okay? Right, we're adding, we've increased the width of this line, right, as opposed to this one, right? So that is line weight, okay? Line paths tend to add to the definition of a line, right? You have more jaggedy line, or these are kind of wavy. You have jagged, you have straight lines, you have diagonal, you have vertical. This is technically a horizontal, right? So you have more soft lines where maybe you've had your opacity turned down or something, or you're not painting with as much ink, right? So you could have something like this, right? Or something that's pretty heavy with the ink all the way up, right? So you can have different definitions to those lines that add to the overall definition, right? Moving so much. Sure. It's probably just from me drawing. Let me see here. Hopefully that's a little bit better. Yeah, that should be better. Sorry about that. I think my little stabilizer was just kind of messed up. So that should, I'm drawing now. Hopefully that's not. Yeah, that shouldn't be wiggling now. Okay. Sorry about that. Let me know if it gets bad again. Okay. So we've got, you know, the relationship between edges, which we kind of talked about earlier, right? So if I have, you know, an edge like this where it's very sharp, we could do something similar. Where if I change colors here, we go with an orange or something. And we've got the relationship right there. So if I go here, the relationship that sits here in between those two lines is very sharp, right? Now, if I've got a different type of brush, let's say I've got like a softer brush or something, right? And we do the same two colors, it's going to be a very different relationship, right? So if I have the same blue or purple and I have an orange like this, that relationship there is much different, right? A little bit more fuzzy, not as clear and sharp, okay? That's still a line too, right? That's implied. Okay. Lines can also be defined by their placement in space. We kind of already talked about that. Horizontal, vertical, diagonal, right? They can be actual or implied, which we just kind of discussed, right? Actual lines are what they are, right? An actual line is something that's been drawn in the space, right? We have an actual line, right? This is an actual line versus an implied line that's happening right here, right? So just a little bit different in the definition there. You also have lines that can be solid or broken, right? So let's say I have, let's jump back to my other brush that I like to use here. So you could have, you know, a brush that's like this, and your line could be something more like this, right? This is still as much as a line as the line above it, right? Even though it's broken. Okay. And then a line that bounds a shape or describes an outermost edge is also is called a contour line. Okay. So if I have, let's say I have a circle, right? Let's grab my purple again. So I have a circle, right? This outermost edge right here is called a contour line. That's running around the outside of this circle. Okay. And the reason why I'm trying to give you some of these definitions too, and I'm kind of focusing on them, or they've been bolded in these pages, is they are kind of fair game for our quiz later on in the semester. Okay. So try to remember some of these definitions. The page will be published for you so you can take a look at it later. Here's some more types of lines that we kind of talked about. You've got contour lines, which we talked about. Scribbling lines are obviously what they are, right? You did them as a kid. Scribble, scribble. You can also do scribbles kind of to, you know, sketch certain objects, create certain things, right? I don't know what I'm drawing here, but right, you can use that to define certain edges of things. So, right, you can use scribbles to your advantage. Sketch loose kind of feels similar to a scribble. Sketch loose is a little bit more refined, I feel. Construction lines, I don't know if any of you have ever heard of a construction line before, but if you have not, let's take a look at one real quick. I'm just going to create a new construction lines. You can think of those as, let's say you've got you're drawing like a human head, right? You've seen people do this before. Somebody will do something where they're drawing, you know, a human head. And you've seen people do this, right? And they'll take this line and use it as a definition for that, you know, head that they're drawing, right? And use that to help kind of measure out the things that they're building over here, right? And help them define where certain aspects or certain objects need to be located on the object itself, right? So if you've got this head or whatever that you're drawing, you can use these lines as construction lines. People do that all the time. Okay. You also have measurement lines too. Let's say you're drawing like a landscape. So you've got something like this. And let's say you've got, you know, stuff in the background that you're drawing for your landscape. And maybe you want to use certain heights of things to define how tall certain things need to be. So you have a line like this that you've set up and say, okay, well, all of my buildings in this image need to be, this is my building height, right? This is my foreground height. This is my background height. You know, this is the height of people. And you've got all these different things to try to build your composition. Okay. So that is measurement lines. Those can be super helpful as well. And then, you know, some more terms here: wide, narrow, adding weight, right? You've got hard, soft, light, hatched, shading. You know, if we talk about shading, if you've never seen or heard of shading before, right? If I were to just do a quick example of shading for you, hatching is very similar in a sense where people will use hatch lines to do their shading. But if I was just going to do a quick shaded object for you. So if we do something like this. We'll start with more of a middle ground here. Okay. And then I can take this. So if I have, it's just shading is talking about adding light and shadow to your object, right? Defining a light source. I'm not too worried about that on this assignment, but you will end up doing that in future assignments. So it's good to talk about now. Let me grab a good brush here. So let's say we have this, you know, purple sphere here, and we want to just try to start adding some shading to this. I'd usually try to define where my light source is coming from. So I'd say, you know, somewhere over here, this is my, you know, I could say my light source is over here, right? So here's my light source coming in from this direction, right? And if we're shading this, you know, we'd have something like this. Then we could take, you know, a lighter color here, define where that light source is coming in from. And then we definitely get some bounced light here too. So coming off the bottom side. And then you have a shadow of some sort from that, right? But we're just talking about adding kind of some simple shading, right? So people will do the same thing with like a hatch, right? So instead of, you know, trying to draw where that shading is with like a soft brush like I was doing, they'd have a harder brush or something, and they'd end up doing that shading with, you know, hatching and cross hatching, if you've ever seen that before, where they've got lines that look like this. So they'll have a bunch of stuff right here, and then they'll come through and hatch or cross hatch to do that. So hatching is just when it's in one direction. You've got cross hatching when you come back, right? To see some examples of that. So just to give you, you know, a little bit of an example of how that works, right? Here's some good examples. Right, they've just defined the light source kind of like I did, right? And then they've gone through and added the contours to give it shape, and then used lines closer together to define shadow, lines farther apart to define the light, right? So there's that as well. Okay. So some things about line, just to kind of talk about some basic stuff, right? Lines communicate action, mood, drama, detail, texture, tone, value, etc. Style, okay? The way that they do that, you've seen that before, right? Things that have heavier, darker shapes and lines to them, right? Tend to feel a little bit more intense, right? Or a little heavier, a little, you know, sometimes they can feel angry or, you know, assertive. Things that are a little bit softer and lighter can feel airy, cloudy, happy, nice, right? If you take a look at even our assignments here, the mood and feel between this Gengar right here versus our kind of watercolored Dratini is very different, right? That's just based on the line being used, okay? One's a lot more bold and in your face. One is very kind of airy and free flowy, right? Okay, let's jump back to our page here. Lines are also used to create shapes and negative spaces. So to give you an example of that, right? Lines, obviously we're creating shape with line. They use that to do negative space stuff as well, right? Something that you might not ever be able to unsee. A great example of negative space that's super easy to kind of relate to is FedEx. Have you ever seen the FedEx logo before? If you haven't, they have a very kind of cheeky thing that they've done, right? Where the between the E and an X is an arrow because they're a shipping company, right? So they use that negative space. The X is definitely pushed up against the E there to create this arrow. And if you never noticed it before, now you'll never be able to unsee it. They use it in a lot of their branding too, so I'd be surprised if you hadn't seen it, but if you hadn't, you're welcome. So that's a negative space, right? There's plenty of other examples of that, but using the negative space, that's a good one right there. Okay. As far as lines being used to show contours, right? You've got characters that are very like round. Like if you look at certain characters, there is a trying to think of a good one right off the bat. Even if you just look at Mickey Mouse, right? And his design, you know, if you were to outline Mickey, he's got very, you know, solid lines to show those contours, to show, you know, his design, right? Very easy to read and flow. These lines definitely define his shape, right? You can see it on Pokemon too. It's pretty easy to tell. Spheal is very much a contoured ball of a little, you know, ball of seal, right? And then lines can imply movement or direction. You've seen it your whole life in comic books, in TV shows, in other things like that. Lines can be used to communicate movement or action, right? In a comic book, you'll see, you know, swoosh lines coming off of something, right? To make it go, oh, wow, that thing's moving fast. Or when somebody gets punched in the face, you know, you'll see their fist outlined, you know, they've got their fist, something like this. And then it's outlined by, you know, a bam, you know, to give it some sort of, you know, feeling of, I'll never see FedEx the same. You know, that this jagged explosion kind of look makes it feel you know, more intense, right? Okay. And then you've got lines that organize elements of your design, which again, I keep falling back to comic books, but it's very nice and easy to explain with, right? You've got something like this in comic books, right? You've got panels, or even in manga, right? You may have something that looks like this that organize your thoughts. You've got panels here and here and here and here and here, and that is how you organize or, you know, determine your scene, right? Kind of nice. And these lines are used to organize that. Okay. And then just some final thoughts on line here. Position and perception of line is a big deal. Okay. Lines, because our standard frame of reference is a rectangle, which I can explain to you why it's a rectangle. What are you looking at me through right now? Your computer screen. What is my camera pointing to show my face right now? A rectangle. What is your phone? A rectangle. What is a book? It's a rectangle, right? Your frame of reference, a standard frame of reference for you to view media, images, everything is in a rectangle, right? So lines, if you have a line that is parallel to the edge of that rectangle, it feels more stable. Okay. And that's just because of our standard frame of reference as a society. Okay. As a people, as a, you know, we view lots of things through the standard frame of reference, which is a rectangle. So if I have a line that's parallel to that, you know, frame of reference, it feels more stable. Why? Because I'll give you a few different reasons. Okay. Because horizontal lines are viewed more stable because of gravity, right? This, when you put a horizontal line through this standard frame of reference, it feels like the ground, right? Feels like gravity is going to pull you towards this thing, right? And then if you have a horizontal line, it's still viewed as stable, but just a little bit less so. And there tend to be, you know, a little bit more assertive, right? A little bit more in your face. Buildings, walls, you know, obstacles tend to be more vertical, right? And then you've got lines that are diagonal, right? And these communicate, you know, action or movement, okay? They're a little bit more dynamic, right? If I place something at the top of this, it's probably going to roll down. Or if I have, you know, diagonal lines on this page, I could be communicating movement or something, right? Things on slopes tend to move, right? Or on diagonals. So that's why they can be viewed as a little bit more dynamic. You've seen it too, right? Movement lines, whoosh lines, all those different things, okay? And that's all I've got online for right now. So hopefully your eyes didn't glaze over too bad. Of an Among Us crewmate, true. Yeah, so line is important to our foundation of drawing, and it's what we're going to try to focus on, which is why I kind of talked your ear off a little bit on some line vocabulary and basics, okay? Because what your assignment is on today is using line to determine the different styles and things of your 6 Pokemon or 6 characters that you're going to draw today, okay? So, with that being said, I'd like to jump into a little bit of a Photoshop tutorial for you all. What I'd like to know too is, if you can for me real quickly, go ahead and put a 1 or a 0 in our chat. 1 if you have used Photoshop before, 2 if you've never used Photoshop before, okay? I'd just like to know. Go ahead and start throwing those in there. I just want to see how many of you have used Photoshop before as a software. would imagine a lot of you haven't, but some of you probably have too. There we go. Coming through now. 2, of course. There always has to be the rebel. And your name is Rebel. I don't know what 2 means. 1 if you haven't, 0, or 1 if you have, 0 if you haven't. 2 means you've extra used it, I guess. I don't know. A lot of 1s. That's good. Quite a few 0s too, though, which is also good, which is why you're in here, right? Okay, so for those of you that have not used the software before, when you first open up Photoshop... Oh, I said 2 if you've used it. My bad. I'm sorry. I might have said 1 or 2. My fault. That's my fault. I thought I said 1 or 0. That's my own bad. That's my ADD right there. Oh, sorry. That's my fault. That shows you how well my ADD works. Okay, good to know. Cool. Okay, so what I want to do is give you guys just a kind of super, not a super brief, but a brief intro into the software, teach you enough tools to make you dangerous so that you can work on the assignment today. Okay. So let's start from just the very beginning. Okay, so when you first open up Photoshop, it's going to look like this. Okay, and if you want to start working in the software, it's pretty straightforward. It's going to give you a collection of all your different stuff that you've ever drawn before, some things that you've worked on. Okay, and then if you want to create a new document, you'll scroll down to this little button right here and you'll hit create new. Okay, it's going to have a bunch of different custom ones or different ones that you can do. You can create your own custom size. You can set your custom background color, which I kind of set mine to that off white color because I don't like to draw on straight white. It hurts my eyes. So I kind of set it to the color of like almost like a construction paper kind of, with that kind of slightly yellow tint to it. Just doesn't hurt my eyes as bad. And then there's a little drop down here that allows you to change from inches to pixels. I usually set it to pixels. I'm just going to create a canvas that's 1920 by 1080, or I could go up a little bit and do 2560 by 1440p, which is fine too. It's just a little bit more dense. And then if you hit create, it will create a new document for you. Okay. And then let's talk a little bit about what happens once you're inside the software. Okay. We'll talk about some buttons here. We'll go through a bunch of stuff here and we'll talk about this. So top of the screen, you're going to have your standard kind of menu hub where you've got a bunch of different menus up on this top sort of bar up here. Okay. Below that is your shelf. Okay. This shelf is going to change depending on which tool you have selected over here on the left-hand side. So this is your tool palette, right? And depending on which tool or brush you have selected, you will have a different shelf, right? So if I have my magic wand picked, you'll see that shelf changes versus if I have my eyedropper selected, different shelf, right? Gradient tool is going to change it as well. So depending on what things I have selected over here, that shelf at the top is going to change. I'm better at MS Paint. You know what? I'm better at Mario Paint. So, you know, I'd be impressed if you did your assignment in Mario Paint. Okay. So yeah, left-hand side, you've got your tool palette. You also got your color swatches right here. You've got some masking options here, which we won't talk about today, but maybe in the future. You also have your file tab right here. So if you have multiple files open, they'll kind of line up along the top bar here. Is there a specific side the assignment should be? No. However big you want to make it is fine. I'm not too worried about the size. I would try to stick around the 1920 by 1080 just because it's clean and you can put 6 little characters on this pretty easy, right? And it's like a monitor size, which is nice. But yeah, I'm not like super strict on this file size. Okay, so we've got your tool palette, right? Let's talk through some of these tools. You've got your move tool, just kind of allows you to move things. You've got marquee tools, which kind of mask off certain areas. So like if you did marquee a selection here and then decided you want to paint in here, you could then paint inside this little square, and that marquee would kind of mask off everywhere else. So you could draw inside of just this square, right? Then you can move that little square, right? You can move that around, you can change it. There's a lasso tool, which is also just a different form of selection, which allows you to do a similar thing here, right? So just a different type of selection to the rectangle marquee. These are just sort of freehand marquee tools, right? Let's draw for the DS. Sure. Okay. Below that, you've got some more tools. You've got your magic wand tool, which we won't really talk about today. Cropping tools, eyedropper tools. The big one that we want to talk about today is your brush tool, which we will go through here in just a minute. You also have your eraser tool, text tools, gradient tools, smudging, blurring, the pen tool, which is very similar to Illustrator. If you've ever used Illustrator's pen tool, pretty nice. Very easily draw curves and things that are very clean with that pen tool. It functions very, very similar to the tool in Illustrator. Like I said, if you haven't used that tool inside of Illustrator, it's very nice. Okay. I think you can set the pen tool to not have a fill, and it can just be a stroke. So if you just wanted to draw with that, it needs to have a point thing kind of assigned to it. So if we did like a 3-point. So if you came here with your this is all wigging out because of my right, but you can kind of see how that works. So that's your pen tool. You also have your text tools. Like I said, shape tools all live in here as well. If you click and hold, you can go through a bunch of different shapes. You have a hand tool, which is like a, you know, the ability to drag and move things around as well. Then you have a zoom, which I'm going to teach you something right now. The zoom in Photoshop is okay. It's not nearly as nice as the zoom in Illustrator. It's kind of clunky compared to Illustrator's. I much prefer to have scroll as a zoom inside of Photoshop. In Illustrator, I don't, but in Photoshop, I do. So if I go here to edit, preferences, tools, this menu should pop up right here. And there's a little checkbox that says zoom with scroll wheel. If you like to zoom with your scroll wheel, it's a very nice checkbox. It's easy to find. Makes zooming in and out in Photoshop a lot more friendly. So I tend to have that turned on. Not saying that this one doesn't work. It can just be a little bit annoying. And it's not my favorite tool to use. Okay. So that's as far as your tool palette goes. Over here on the right hand side, you've got your history, so things that you've done, right? You also have more brush settings if you wanted to pull these up. You have different brushes. They also live over here if you have the brush tool selected. You have like type character settings. You also have more paragraph settings and things like that. To the right hand side, you have your color wheel. This color wheel can be changed. Yours probably looks something like this as a default, which is fine. I don't mind the hue cube, but for me, I prefer using the color wheel. I just like the wheel a lot better because it gives you a saturation and value slider right here, right? So if you've got, you know, your ability to change your saturation, your black and white level, right? You can change it here. There's a bunch of different ones. You can go to, there's like this cube. There's a bunch of different ones that you can use. Some people just like to use a different type of wheel. I tend to like this color wheel the best though. I don't know. It's just easier for me to use. The color cube is not terrible though. Like the hue cube, this is not bad either. This is completely acceptable. I just find this one to be more enjoyable to use. So whatever you want to do is fine. Over here on the right hand side, you've got libraries. This is stuff from Autodesk. You could technically, I think you can get rid of this. I think that's just stuff from Photoshop itself. Like if you wanted to download stuff from Autodesk, or not Autodesk, Adobe. Sorry. You can add new swatches with this little button here, which is just basically, think of that as like a permanent color. Like say you find a color that you enjoy, that you've kind of set the brightness and saturation to, and you've got, you know, found something, you don't have to try to find it again. You can set a swatch that will save it to your little swatches here. So you can do that. Below the color wheel here, you have a couple different tabs, and these tabs kind of correspond to the tool that you have selected, right? So if I have my brush selected, there will be some different things here. If I change to magic wand or different things, like if I have my shape tool open and I use a shape tool, it will change the properties right here. So this is kind of a dynamic tab based on certain things you have selected or you're currently doing within your Photoshop scene, right? You also have adjustments, which you can change, like brightness, contrast, different things, curves, all through here. Below that, you have your layer and your channels. Channels, we're not going to talk about a ton today, but layers are super important. Okay, so the nice thing about being in Photoshop is we are painting digitally, right? What's the one nice thing about painting digitally? One, there's no mess. Two, you don't have to buy any paints, which is nice. But with this, you have the ability to erase and use layers. Okay, if you paint something, you can just erase it, or you can add a new layer and turn things on and off. Like when you're painting, if you paint a line, unless you paint over it or try to scrape it off with your spudger, it's kind of, yeah, you're kind of set, right? So with painting in Photoshop, it's a lot nicer. You can use layers, right? You can organize things within layers. You could paint something on this layer, have a new layer painting a completely different shape or color, and not affect or destroy anything on the previous layer. So it's a non-destructive workflow, right? By using layers, which is very nice. Makes things very easy to work in, very organized, very pleasant to work in. And we'll be using layers a lot today. Okay, so to add a new layer, down here at the bottom, you'll see there's a little box right here that says add layer or create new layer. It looks like a little box like this. If you can see it, it's kind of hard to see on my monitor, but it looks something like this. It's a little button with a little plus sign in it. That is your add layer. Okay. You can group layers. So let's say you have two layers right here and you want to end up grouping those. You can group them with this folder, call them a certain name, just to keep things further organized, right? The nice thing too is if you have certain things in a group and you want to move those, if you just click the group itself and move it, it will move the whole group. So all the layers under this group will get moved, which is very nice. Okay. You have the ability to do different types of adjustment layers and masking layers, effects. We probably won't talk about those a ton today, but we probably will in the future. Okay. But that is your UI. Just a quick 10,000 foot view of your UI. What I want to talk to you about are some hotkeys and how to use your brush today. Okay. Because using the brush is going to be the biggest part of this assignment, right? I want you to play with line and line usage. So I want you to use the brush and change your brush type, your brush weight, your brush size. Okay. So let's talk about that. So the hotkey for your brush is B. Okay. Make sure you have a new layer. I'm going to delete these real quick. My Photoshop is doing something very annoying here. Let's see. Where it's like flickering. I don't know if you guys can see that through the stream, but it is driving me nuts. And I don't know if it's because I don't know why it's doing that. It's driving me nuts. Oh, let's see. I can turn it off. Edit preferences. Performance. Use graphics processor. Still doing it. The funny thing is it's doing it even when I'm using my mouse. So I'm not sure why it's doing it. Oh, uncheck and restart Photoshop. Let's restart. Let's restart Photoshop now that I did that. I can see it and it's driving me nuts, so hopefully it's not coming through on the stream, but oh, it's not doing it anymore. Thank you. Oh my gosh. That just changed my life. It wasn't doing it before, but all of a sudden it started doing it recently. I'm like, this is insanity. I can't keep doing this. Okay, cool. Awesome. So, I lost my train of thought though. What was I talking about? Oh, brush. So, brush key is B. Okay. When you're in your brush tool or your brush tool, you can go to the top here and you're going to see a bunch of different options. Okay. So you have your ability to change your brush type. You can change the brush size. The hotkeys for your brush size are the bracket keys. So if you want to make your brush bigger or smaller, it's left and right bracket keys. Okay. So that will make your brush bigger or smaller. Okay. If you want to change your brush type itself, there are different brushes that live within these folders. They may be like closed up by default like this. I tend to use within the legacy brushes. I think they are Kyle's brushes, maybe not. Maybe they are. I can't remember. It might just be general brushes here. This song. Okay. Let's find another playlist here. Cool. Okay, so you can change them through your general brushes. This one has some good brushes in here. There's a brush in here called Kyle's brush. I can't remember if they're in the dry media. Are they? Yes, right here. So this Kyle's inking thick and thin brush is like one of my favorite brushes. The problem is I'm noticing when I don't use my graphics driver, my lines are not nearly as clean. Now it's doing the flickering thing again. Not when I'm painting, but okay. Anyways, so you can change your brush type here. There's different brush types that you can use. Okay, you can play with a bunch of different one of these. Jump through all the folders, find stuff you like. That's how I ended up on this inking thick and thin brush, because I just like how it works. I just like the way that it feels and paints. So I tend to use that quite a bit. If you go through here, this is just your different types of layer modes. We'll talk about those later. Don't worry about them for the assignment this week. Something you do need to worry about is your opacity. This is very, it can be really nice if you want to go for a more of a painterly look, right? If you have your opacity turned on, this is how you can kind of start painting and mixing color, right? So if I have something like this and grab a darker one and start painting, have my opacity on, right? I can really start trying to do like a painterly look there, right? Then if you go to your right here, you've got pressure for opacity, which I don't know if I love that. When you have that selected, if you press lightly, it turns up the opacity. If you press hard, it turns down your opacity. So it's just kind of like a dynamic opacity. It's just not my favorite. I'd rather set the opacity myself, right? So you can play with that if you want. Flow is how much ink is coming off your brush. So if my flow is set really low, you'll see it's kind of a less ink coming off the brush. If I turn that flow all the way up, you won't be able to see, right? A little bit easier to tell. Okay. The next thing here is smoothing. Smoothing is like a lazy mouse option. Okay. So if I have my smoothing turned on, you'll see that if I turn it up to like 50 and pull, you'll see that my brush lags behind my cursor. Okay. Right. What that does for people is it makes it so if you are a little bit shaky or not as confident in your brush stroke, that can smooth out a lot of the issues that you're having, right? So using that smoothing can really help. However, it can really slow down your ability to paint at high speeds, which could be an issue for you, or it could not be. At 100%, you can see how far that brush stroke lags behind. Sometimes that's really nice when you're trying to get really clean curves, okay? I usually sit mine around 16 to 20%. That's kind of where I found a good, like, smooth spot for me where I could still paint at the speed that I want to, and it feels like it's correcting some of the shakiness in my hand, right? So that's what I tend to use. You can set brush angles. There's some settings here for different types of smoothing. You can have it be like a pulled string, which you can see, like if I have it set to pulled string mode, it's a little bit different. You could have it be the stroke catch up or catch up on stroke end. So it just depends on how you want that to work. I tend to have it on the stroke catch up. Flow and opacity are not the same practical function, right? Opacity is like the transparency of your brush, right? So that's low opacity. Okay. If my opacity is 100% and my flow's at, you know, a low percentage, or even really lower percentage, like something like this, okay, you can tell the difference, right? So this was the low opacity, right? This one was the low opacity, and this one was the low flow, okay? So you can tell a difference, right? One is almost slowing down the amount of ink coming off your brush. This one is just like giving your brushstroke a transparency, right? While this is kind of doing that, but it's almost like a blended transparency, if that makes sense. So they're not quite the same, but yeah, you can play with them and see how that works. This last little target right here, this is your pressure sensitivity. This one you do want to leave on, and I'll show you the difference, right? So if I don't have pressure sensitivity turned on, you'll see that my stroke, no matter how hard I'm pressing, it does not taper off, right? And then if I do have it turned on, if I'm drawing lightly, you'll see that my stroke kind of falls off a little bit better. It's just a little more reactive to what I'm doing, okay? No worries. That's a great question, right? They do look very similar at first look, but they do function a little bit differently. So no problem at all. Great question. Okay. As far as the brush goes, that's all I've got to show you for right now. You can change some more things over here in your brush setting, like the brush angle. You can see kind of how that affects your brush. Play with that, see what you like, right? You can try that out. You can try out the roundness of your brush. You can change the angle. Just some more things, right? You can change a ton of different stuff over here, okay? I don't mind if you try this out. So something to know in Photoshop is literally just taking a single image and stacking it a bunch of times in a row to create a brush, okay? So if you see that, if you change the spacing of your brush, right? And now I paint like this, much different feel if I change that spacing back to 1%, right? Where it's now I'm painting like this, right? Do you need to do anything to make it save settings? I don't believe so. I believe if you adjust something, the next time you open it, it should recognize things that you've changed. I'm pretty sure. Now, if you open it up on a different computer, even if you're logged in to your Photoshop account, I don't know if it will save your changes for you. So that's something to note. Okay, so what I want to do now is just kind of go through my process. Oh, I do want to show you one more thing, the eraser, okay? The eraser is the E key, and you can erase using the E key. The other thing I want to show you is do not paint on your background layer. That's just bad practice, like I just did. E key is your eraser, okay? So you can erase, which is nice. You can change the size of your eraser, same way you can change the size of your brush. Okay. And any other tools that I jump through, we will talk about as we're working. But I do want to pick a Pokemon and just start kind of drawing and sketching and have you guys kind of see my workflow. And then you can either mimic that or find your own path. However you want to do that is fine, but I'll show you kind of how I set up my layers, how I go about like sketching and then doing like a more finalized line art layer and then adding my color layers and things like that. Okay. So I do want to pick a Pokemon. Who do I want to do? Somebody cute and simple, so we're not here all night. Let's see here. Do Rowlet. I did a Rowlet before. I wanted to find him. I would do Gengar, but I already have examples of Gengar on the assignment, or else I would do Gengar because I love Gengar. I'm gonna try to see if I can find my Rowlet. Draw Voltorb, it's impossible. Nah, that wouldn't be too bad. I don't know if I have him. Maybe we will do a Rowlet. That would be... Maybe we'll do Rowlet. Just do our little guy. I love this. This is so good. Okay, let's see. I don't know. Which one do I want to do? He's so cute. I like the Winky Rowlet. Let's see if I can find that somewhere. If I can find a reference I like somewhere. Guess I could go off this. So many people are throwing out so many things. Snorlax would be fun too. Let's do a Snorlax. I haven't done Snorlax. I love this Snorlax right here with his little hat. Do that guy. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm okay if you guys want to use a specific drawing as a reference. So if you want to drag and drop it into your scene, what I do not want you to do is use it as like a trace. So don't just go here and then just trace over the top of him, right? Like don't add a new layer and just start tracing over him, right? So I want you to freehand it, okay? But I'm going to do some stuff here to try to help myself a little bit. And I'm going to use symmetry just because he's pretty symmetrical for the most part, which is fine. What's having the trouble here? Okay, cool. So let's start with our, what I'm going to do is turn my brush down really small, right? And I'm just going to use this blue to kind of sketch. So I'll come here and I'm just going to try to get, what's nice is I can do like my sketch layer in symmetry. And then I can kind of just sketch him out a little bit. So I'm trying to think. That's about, how tall is that? One. He's about 3 heads tall. So if I come here, I go here and here. So about here is the middle of his belly. So come in with that first line. We'll go here, kind of come off. Okay, and then that can start this. This could even be a little bit lower. Do I like Decidueye? Yeah, I love Decidueye's design in Arceus. It's great. I love it. Super cool. I think I almost like it more than the actual Decidueye. I don't know. The hood's pretty dope on the actual Decidueye too, though. And I'm not just going to draw him one for one. I'm going to take some liberties. I kind of have my own little art style, so. But I'm going to try to make sure I get his shape right. So if that was his belly, then he's one more kind of step here to the bottom of himself. So we go out here. He's kind of flat, but I want to make it a little bit wider, something like this. Okay, and I'm just kind of sketching. See, I'm kind of just sketching these in and make sure I'm getting the right kind of shape here. I don't know if that's the right spot for his foot. Let's see. His foot kind of hangs right off the edge. And this is on the inside edge of here and here. So if I come like here, so his foot should sort of do something like this. I love Hisuian. Yeah, Hisuian Decidueye is super sick. He's very cool design. I really like him a lot. His foot kind of has like a square sort of feel to it. Something like kind of like that. He's got his little toes. Too big. And his little arms kind of come up like this. Okay. And then he's got his little face. This is the best part of Snorlax right here. Doop. Doop. I need to make mine a little bit wider though. Let's see. I also want to get his face detail in here too. Kind of like this, and then comes into a point. Needs to be a little bit wider though. That. And then we'll grab his mouth. Okay. Now I'm just gonna erase Snorlax drawing around here just so I can get it out of my picture. And I also need to take my little Snorlax has ears that are too big, so we're gonna make some adjustments here to our dude. So I'm gonna take my lasso here, take this around, whoop, and I'm gonna go. There's a tool that I'm gonna show you right now called Transform, free transform. So if you hit Control T while you have something selected, it should. Why is that not? There we go. So Control T, and then I should be able to just widen this a little bit. I feel like it needs to be. Then I can try to throw that back in the middle. That's a little better, I feel like. Because then that part of his head. Okay. Now I feel like that's a little bit better. Then his ears need to go kind of like this. Or like this. All right. Cool. Okay. So here's my little sketch, right? I used my construction lines. I got them all kind of figured out, right? Now what I want to do is go back through with kind of a cleaner line, right? And I may need to adjust my symmetry line a little bit. So if I take my symmetry line, make sure I'm on center. Okay. Now I'm going to create a new layer. So I'm going to call this one my sketch layer. So I'm going to double click on that layer that I created. Let's call this sketch. Okay. Next layer I'm going to drop in. So I'm going to create a new one. I'm going to call this line art. So I'm going to come back through on my sketch layer under my opacity drop down right here. I'm going to drop that sketch layer down real slow, right? Real low. Okay. So we freehanded that one. We're just going to kind of trace this one a little bit nicer, right? With a little bit cleaner line. So we could come in here. I'm going to turn up my smoothing to like 20%. Grab my same brush. I'm going to grab a black, I think, because I want to do them in this kind of black here. And then I'm going to go through and I'm just going to start on my line art layer, kind of tracing over here and trying to get some clean lines, okay? Yeah, so actually that's a great thing. I'm going to give you guys a little bit of a tip here, okay? I'm going to draw a new layer real fast. So if you are struggling to kind of get the connection between your brain and your drawing tablet right now, like if this connection is hard, like to draw down here, because mine's a screenless drawing tablet, right? Here's a kind of exercise that one of my professors taught to me, which is to draw concise spirals, reversed in every which way you can draw them, okay? Find ways to draw spirals. Draw them big, draw them small, reverse where those are at, right? And then really try to draw them concise, right? See how I messed that one up? Try to get them tight. You could try to do looser spirals and then really make them tight. But that exercise here will really help you to make the connection between your tablet and your screen. And the more you do that and practice that, it will really help, I promise. Okay. So that's kind of my tip to you. I don't like where his toe is, so I'm going to move this when I'm sketching or when I'm doing my final pass. there we go. Okay, cool. We'll throw these kind of little on there. Let's turn our symmetry off. Because now I'm going to go through and start kind of cleaning some of this up, working on my other layer. So turn off symmetry. Actually, we'll leave it on for just a second while I clean some of this up. Tie some of these together. Cool. Now I'm going to turn my sketch layer off, make sure I'm happy with this. Like I said, I'm just going to clean up some of these. Let's go back here, last used. Just want to clean this up just a little bit. Come in here and clean up the toes. Clean up right here where the hand is at. Cool. Don't want this kind of tail on here. Clean up the mouth just a little bit. And then I forgot his little hat. I need to draw his little hat. I might draw a different hat. I want to do a different little hat on there. I don't like that one. I'll draw my own hat. Give him a little 5-panel hat. Okay. Okay, let's turn our symmetry off. Now I'll come in here and add some of these kind of, I like these little shading details that they do to them. Oh, today's attendant answer. I will do that in just a moment. Let's go through kind of the last few steps here. What I want to do is add some color layers now. Okay, so I did this one. This was my line art layer, right? This one's going to be color 1. So my first color, what I'm going to do is just paint kind of my base colors in here, okay? So I'm going to put my color below my line art, and then I am going to grab kind of my Snorlax color here. And I'm just going to start painting with this. I'm going to fill the areas where his color is, and I'm not going to be super precise, right? Because I'm going to create other layers. I'm just going to try to fill the areas where I know he needs to be that color. And then I'll come back and I'll clean it up a little bit. Okay, make sure we get this. Then I come back through and I can kind of clean up these edges. I'm not too worried about the in the foot really, because we're going to color over it, but I am worried about these edges, right? Make sure we clean the stuff up out here. And we also want to make sure we're getting all the spots that need to get covered. Okay. The one thing about turning off the graphics driver, it really decreased the quality of my painting in here, which is not fun. But the flickering was very not fun, so I don't know what the balance is there. This does not look nearly as nice as it could, I don't think. We're going to paint over the top of those, so let's go to the next color. So we'll go color 2 here. I'm going to grab our base tan, which is pretty close to what we are already painting with, but that's all right. Try to be a little bit more precise with this one. bit of cleanup up here. So we'll erase here, there. Let's get into our little feet. Again, I'm not super worried about the toes because I'm going to color over that. Just making sure I'm getting all the areas that need to be colored in. Okay, then the next one we're going to grab, let's grab our little brown there. So we'll go color 3. Grab this little brown color for the bottoms of his feet. Okay, and then we need I want to do, could do the shading or something else, but let's do another color real quick. Let's do white. We'll just call this white. We'll get in there and paint the toes and toenails. Fingernails, we need to get his teeth. I'm not sure what that is, so let's go back to color 3, or color 2, grab this. Let's paint over that. Make sure we're getting all the way to the edge. Okay. And then I want to give him a, I don't know. The red's fine. We could do a little red hat. That's fine. Let's make it a little bit more vibrant though. We could make it Ash's hat too if we wanted. Let's come back here. What's Ash's logo? Does it look like that? Oh, it's this. Okay. Now what I want to do is above my color layers, I'm going to take all my color layers here and my line art layer. Actually, I'm just going to take all my color layers here and I'm going to group these and call this color. Okay. Or call this base color. So we'll go base color. And then I'm going to create new layers here. And this one is going to be shading dark. Yeah, it changes depending on the region for sure. And then what I want to do is come in here and go, okay, let's select on color 2. I just want to paint some shading in these areas. So I'm going to use my magic wand tool, which is right here, which allows you to just separate areas based on their color. And then I can hold shift and select multiple areas. Then under my shading dark, I'm going to take my color picker here. I'm going to shift the hue a little bit to a more orange. And then we're going to change the brightness. And then we'll paint some shadows in here on our boy Snorlax. Oh, sorry. Good call. I'll move myself right there since I'm not painting right there. So hopefully you can see some of my layer layout right now. So I've got my layers grouped, right? So I've got my base color grouping right here. Now I've got some more layers over the top. This is where I'm kind of painting that shading layer. And I may have to come back in here and touch this up, but we'll see. Okay, then I'm going to Control D this. We'll come in here with that shading color and kind of clean this up. It didn't get everything. I can also grab this layer and hit erase and clean. That up a little bit. Click this layer, eyedropper. Try to clean that up just a little bit. Okay. And then what I'd like to do is grab the same shading dark layer, but do it based off of my color 1. And then we'll paint in some shadows based on his main color. Again, I'm going to shift the hue a little bit, so we'll go a little more blue. We'll adjust the brightness. We're going to come in here and go whoop. Do something like that. Okay, and then I do want to grab something over here. And then I might add a little bit more shading here where I think makes sense. So I might throw something here. Maybe underneath his hat a little bit. And then for me, I want to do a couple highlights just because I think it makes the thing pop a little bit more. I want to change this one to shading light. Shading light right there. And then I'm going to take this guy, shift my hue, bump it up. just like the look of that. I think it sells it a little bit more. Let's hit him with a couple more of these. And I'm going to grab the green color. We'll shift the hue. Lighten it up. Maybe not right there, but maybe we hit it the same. Okay. All right. I'm pretty happy with that for right now. Then what I want to do is take my shading. We'll group those. We'll call these shading layers. We're going to collapse that. I'm going to delete this because I don't need this anymore. And then, you know, my Snorlax is pretty good for right now, right? I could take this and roll with this. What I'd like to do maybe is add a little bit more shading to the hat or something, but for right now it's okay. Then what I can do is take all of my layers here and group these and just call this Snorlax 1. And then you'd need to do 5 more, right? So I could take this Snorlax here and just move him, right? I could scale him down by hitting Control T, right? That little window will pop up. Then we've got one Snorlax done. And then we could start a new grouping of layers. Okay. And start drawing some more Snorlaxes, right? So we could go, you know, a more sketchy Snorlax where, you know, maybe your layers look something a little bit more, you know, sketch, something that looks maybe a little bit more like our original sketch layer, if you remember that. Right, you have something along the lines of this that maybe you just refine a little bit more, right? Then maybe you have another layer where you don't have, maybe you don't have the line art, right? You have something that looks a little bit more painterly, something like this, right? Which could also work. So if you see kind of what I'm talking about, that it's pretty easy to kind of start refining these. Like I could take this like color layers here and refine this just a little bit and make it look nice, and that would work for another style, right? And then you could go from there. Hopefully that makes sense. I don't want to keep you too much longer. We've been going for 2 hours, so what I'd like to do is give you guys time to work, watch the stream back for a little bit, so kind of give you some lab time in a sense, right? but hopefully that makes sense. Hopefully you could see kind of my coloring process, the way I kind of go about it, sketching, then adding in my color layers, kind of moving through the drawing process like that. It doesn't take very long. I kind of went slow just so you could see what I was doing, right? And then, you know, you could definitely amp that up as you move forward in your drawing process, right? Any questions before I call it a night and you guys can just start working on your assignment? So remember, you're doing 6 of these. Make sure you freehand the first one, but then I don't mind if you sketch your own work, right? I definitely sketched over the top to do my line art and things like that. I also don't mind if you use your first finished one to build the other characters as well, right? But if there's any questions, I'd like to answer those before we boogie out for the rest of the evening. Does it matter what game your drawings are from? No. Just try to keep the character simple. I do owe you an attendance question, so let's do that real quick. So on the notepad here, your attendance question answer is, let's do opacity. Okay. That's what this is right here. Okay. So you're going to type in opacity. That's going to be your answer for your attendance question this week. Okay. How to create new layers and still keep the image. Down here at the bottom, you can create new layers by this little button down here on the bottom right. It looks like a plus sign inside of a square. That will create new layers, and you can paint. You can turn off your other images by these little eyeballs here. Your other layers, you can turn those off and on. Your Snorlax, my Snorlax makes you want to draw Totoro for sure. So here's your quiz question, okay? Quiz answer. Attendance, sorry, not quiz, attendance question answer. Okay, everybody. Not seeing any questions or anything, so I'm gonna let you go for the evening. If you have any issues or something pops up, let me know. Hit me up on the Discord. You've got your TAs as well that should be there to help you every step of the way. So if you need something from us, make sure you're hitting us up on there. I'm excited to see what you guys come up with. Hopefully next week, what I'd like to do is do a little bit of a showcase, kind of show off some of the stuff that people have worked on. Okay. We'll do that for the first few minutes of the stream, and then we'll start our next assignment. Okay. So hopefully everyone has a good rest of their week. I appreciate you all being, paying attention, asking good questions. Hopefully you have a good rest of your week, and I will see you next time. Okay. Have a good one, everybody. We'll see ya.